65 had the potential to be an awesome movie-going experience. On a conceptual level, this Scott Beck and Brian Woods directed science fiction actioner can be described as science fiction Adam Driver fights dinosaurs, which is a very strong sales pitch that could easily convince potential audience members into buying a ticket. After all, dinosaurs have always been cool. I mean, let's be honest, they're giant lizard monsters, and we all as a society collectively love them. And then there's the fact that this movie stars a spacefaring Adam Driver, a man who was also very cool. And when a potential movie pits carnivorous prehistoric lizards against a laser gun-toting Adam Driver, that's a compelling argument to go to a multiplex. I mean, come on, Adam Driver fighting dinosaurs should be a slam dunk. It's money in the bank, or the feeling of midlife crisis-fueled regret at a high school reunion. It's just a logical pairing, but unfortunately, 65 does not fulfill the promise of its potential. Like an anxious introvert trying their hand at being a car salesperson for the first time, don't ask. 65 flounders, drowning in the depths of shitty cinematic execution. It's just a bad film. 65's problems start with its story. The plot follows Mills, played by Adam Driver, who is a spaceship courier undertaking a multi-year job in transporting several people in cryopods, Master Chief style. Also, he can use the money from this aforementioned job in order to aid his daughter, who has a severe illness, which, you know, is an understandable motivation. Go Team Dad. But unfortunately for him, things run into a snag. See, Mills' ship hits a cluster of asteroids, which causes that aforementioned ship to malfunction. In fact, many of the people that Mills was transporting died, and as a result, Mills crash lands on an uncharted nearby planet, which turns out to be Earth. An Earth that is dominated by dinosaurs, meaning that the movie is not set in the future, but instead takes place 65 million years ago. Hence why the movie is titled 65, because it's sure as shit not called that because it qualifies for AARP. Nice try getting those bennies though. But back to the point, once on prehistoric Earth, Mills takes stock of his surrounding, equips himself with some advanced science fiction weaponry, finds a young girl named Koa who survived the crash, and learns that there's a cataclysmic asteroid heading straight for Earth. And from there, Mills and Koa search for an intact secondary escape aircraft, and thus trek across an Earth so filled with dinosaurs that it would give John Hammond a big masturbatory fantasy. And Mills and Koa do this all in the hope that they can escape this earthly shithole, all before the asteroid ends dinosaur civilization, alongside Mills and Koa themselves. 65's narrative does not work, mostly because there is minimal character development to speak of here. See, Mills and Koa are basically the only characters with any form of meat or depth within this film, and that is a problem. After all, for 65 to function as an emotional conduit, you know, which is what a good movie is supposed to do, the movie has to deliver a reason for the audience to get invested in these characters. It has to give us a reason to care, but sadly 65 fails here. For one thing, Mills and Koa are very one-dimensional. In fact, Mills is kind of an asshole who leads Koa along by telling her that her parents are still alive, which they aren't. And Koa is singularly focused on finding those aforementioned parents, and for these characters, that's basically it. Sure, these motivations are understandable, but there's just very little to engage with here. And making things even more difficult on the character development front, the two also do not speak the same language. Which, quick aside, I know that sounds very asshole-ish of me to say, but hear me out here. See, where Adam Driver essentially speaks space English, Koa speaks a different language, meaning that a lot of what's supposed to be character development gets really bogged down and stretched out into how these two characters struggle to communicate with one another. And to be clear, there's nothing inherently wrong with different languages, both in real life and in media. In both real life and in movies, people can still connect and communicate with each other even despite not speaking the same language. Cinematically speaking, nonverbal communication can be very effective, as seen in a movie like WALL-E, and then there are good movies featuring characters that don't speak the same language, but do still provide us with quality character development. But this does not work in 65, mostly because, as stated earlier, these characters have less dimension than the Nintendo Entertainment System's graphics card, and for most of the movie, Mills and Koa are the only two characters, meaning that the two primary people we follow in this movie have very little to say, and what they do actually say gets really stretched out due to the fact that they have to find alternative ways to communicate with one another, which then causes 65 to feel like an overly long experience, even despite how this film barely clears the 90 fucking minute mark. And while sure, the movie tries to develop these characters by having Mills and Koa become closer together, the minimal depth and the communications barrier between the two all prevent that goal from coming to fruition. Like, let's be honest, if these characters can't connect with one another, what hope is there of the audience doing the same? The character development is just frustrating like that, and as a result, it's almost impossible for the audience to attach themselves with any part of this film, let alone the characters, in a meaningful way. And when combined with other problems problems like bizarre tonal shifts and how a major character turn is revealed in a less than cinematically effective fashion, 65's human elements do not land. There's no reason to really get invested in any of it. However, with that said, 65 could have still been salvageable. While sure, its lack of emotional resonance would always prevent it from qualifying as good cinema, the film could have still been a fun experience. After all, the movie sold us on the concept of science fiction Adam Driver fighting dinosaurs like T-Rexes, raptors, and other prehistoric lizards that would land John Hammond into boner jail. And from that perspective, 65 could have easily been a fun movie regardless of whether or not its character beats landed. It could have still been enjoyable through its action alone. But sadly, 65 isn't effective as a dinosaur actioner either. If anything, the movie does not get very creative with its premise. Sure, sci-fi Adam Driver has a laser gun and explosive pebbles that are essentially grenades, but 65's action sequences don't really do anything beyond the standard sci-fi laser blast that you'd expect and predict. It doesn't do anything fun, which then causes this film's execution on its potentially interesting concept to get old really fast, missing the mark like a Netflix comedy special set during a eulogy, which to be fair, would still be better than a lot of Netflix's other comedy specials. And overall, 65's run-of-the-mill action damns this movie just as much as the bad character development, because while sure, there's no reason to get emotionally invested in this film, 65's action is so bland and so vanilla that there is no reason to be entertained by it either. It's one of those movies that you just can't wait until the end credits start rolling, which was honestly why I was rooting for the asteroid, truly the film's most sympathetic character, because honestly, a cataclysmic space rock striking Earth means that this movie would end a lot faster. It would give us a mercy kill, a cinematic tap out, and ultimately that's what I think of 65. You should not even bother with this film. It fails to execute on its premise in both an interesting or even a fun way, and overall, it's just a bad time all around. And with that, that was the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a like rating, share, subscribe, ring the bell, and leave a comment telling me what you thought of 65. Also, please consider checking out my Patreon page. $1 a month gets you onto my Discord server, and $5 a month allows you to make quick review and impressions requests. The link to my Patreon is in the description. And speaking of Patreon, I just want to thank my patrons, particularly my high tier ones and Samantha Devlin, Mom, and Morgan. Thank you so much for supporting what I do. Love y'all.